Hello and welcome back to Gooders Front Room, and it's time to want some more Get Lost with my friend.
Dan, and we're reaching the end of season 1 of Lost, and I'm still pretty lost.
Indeed, indeed, it is time for Exodus.
Yep.
Sometimes people, some people make an Exodus on a boat, some people Exodus from the beach.
Yep. And it's a big one. It's a three-parter, so that's what 2 hours, pretty much exactly in
So
terms of.
it's normally like a two-parter with like a super long second part, but we're just going to treat it as all one thing for the sake of this discussion.
And I think that the first thing that I found about this episode, which even though it's 2 hours long, in a lot of ways it's a much simpler episode than a lot of the other ones that we've had. I think you could describe the main A plot, for lack of a better term, as basically a classic fetch quest by the lead characters, where they're suddenly given this impetus to do something, and the way they have to do it is you must go to X, retrieve this item, come back in order to solve your problem.
So in this, you've got the trip to get the dynamite and blow up the hatch. You've got the people on the rafts, and then not straight away, but then by the end of it, you've got the strand of Saeed and Charlie.
Yeah, they're covering the baby strand simultaneously. And all of them are variations of a fetch quest.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting how all three of them resolve themselves with them essentially doing what they set out to do, but but
not necessarily with the desired results.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like they've all achieved what they set out to do, but not necessarily had the desired results.
Yeah, and I think so we open up with the Walt and Michael flashback.
Yep.
And and it's just a little short one, and it's kind of it takes us back to just before. Obviously, all of these flashbacks take us just before people are getting on the flight.
And that's kind of important because there's a lot of flashbacks on it, but unlike virtually all the flashbacks we've seen up to this point, this is kind of harping back effectively to the pilot episode, where you're not going back materially far. Yeah. It's all. I think the furthest they're going back is the morning of the flight for every single person, pretty much. So you're not gaining, or you're not necessarily distracted by huge amounts of backstory or anything like that.
They're mostly just kind of character moments.
Yeah.
Almost kind of fun little bits of showing us the characters interacting with each other before they know each other. There's a lot of that going on.
But as you were saying, on the Michael and Walt one, again, it's some nice little character moments. You've got the sort of Walt rebelling against Michael in terms of the playing the video games and turning the TV up. Yeah. You've got the fight. You've got him sort of saying, "You're not my real dad," or "I won't view you as my real dad." You've got Michael expressing his doubts. I can't quite remember who he's on the phone with. Was it like his sister or his mother or something that is like, "Oh, can you look after him?" So
it's not his mum, because he's kind of stressed out because he doesn't know like what he's going to do with with Walt, rather, basically.
And that's an interesting thing to see, because you've got it's important to see that in his character, because you've had the flashbacks going back to when Walt was just born, and he's clearly very protective and wanting to be the dad then, and then you've got the flashbacks of him taking up the mantle to go and get Walt, so he clearly cares about it. But this is kind of setting the scene of, there's a distance to be traveled before you actually get that healthy father-son relationship, which we've seen on the island, and this is kind of the
so I think that's interesting. Like, a lot of these flashbacks kind of show us, or kind of remind us of like earlier versions of the characters that now like they've changed from.
Absolutely. I mean, the best example of that is the sort of flashback of Charlie, where I'd almost kind of forgotten like how far Charlie had fallen. And so even that very short scene where he's waking up in bed, looking for his heroin, hiding the heroin from the woman who may or may not have been a prostitute. I wasn't entirely sure, but certainly another drug addict like him. And
I think the implication very much there is like she's pretended to be into his band or whatever, but she just knew he had drugs, and that's why.
Yeah,
she's gone along with him. Yeah, and then some of them are just kind of daft, almost just kind of almost throwaway jokes, like in between, like the on island drama. You get these little moments, but like there's the one where Saeed puts his bag down and asks Shannon to look after it in the airport, and she doesn't look up, so she doesn't even see.
Yeah. But again, I think like the running theme of all of those flashbacks was, you've sort of hit the nail on the head in sort of saying it's there to remind you what they were and how much has changed in a relatively short space of time. So that one is the classic, you're seeing Shannon basically just screw over some Arab that she doesn't like. And yet they're the two that sort of have fallen in love with each other in the intervening time. So it's what kind of showing that big change that's taken place.
I think in all of the flashbacks there are two that stand out a little bit more for things going forward. I think
Jack is one.
I'll get on to Jack's in a minute, but I think the other one for me is Hurley's.
Okay.
It's presented as this very comedic sequence.
Yeah, I mean that was definitely the most comedic of all of them.
It's quite a long one, which I think is just like it's quite an interesting choice that they make, because this Hurley's flashback comes quite late.
Yeah, I think it's
2 hours.
I think it's the second from last one. I think Locke's one is the last one, and Hurley's the second from last one.
And it's probably the longest sequence out of all of them. And for the most part, it's very comedic. But I think a couple of things interest me about it is, well, first off, it's littered with the numbers.
Everywhere.
It's like his hotel.
I stopped even keeping track of them because I was like, all right, okay, this is literally just going to be like there's a sports team that he runs past, and they've got
there's his hotel room number is 2342. When his car breaks down, like we see his
numbers
speed and it's like 4216. 84. And it's 23 degrees, like in the car. There's a sports team of players that he passes by, and they've got, I think it's like 4, 8, 15. Like all the numbers on their backs, basically. He pays 1,600 for this. Obviously the flight is at gate 23. That's like the most obvious one. So there's that obviously aspect of it, but what I think is an intriguing setup is the fact that the whole thing is about his luck, and he's having bad luck, and he's going to miss this flight. So it's kind of set up in this way. You think, oh, he's going to miss the flight he should have been on, and then he'll get on 8:15, and that's what will crash. But no, it's 8:15 that he gets on. That was the flight he was meant to get on.
And you've got the whole thing that there's all this bad luck that's conspired against him, and then you've got this interesting sort of question as to, because he sort of says, oh, I think it's the not stewardess but the gate handling person basically says, oh, it's your lucky day, and you've got that sort of open question like, well, this plane's going to crash, so is lucky day, is he lucky or unlucky at this point that you sort of don't really know?
And it really it ties into, like, we've discussed it a few times, that idea of like why people are on that particular flight, like what has pulled them onto that flight. Because one of the earlier flashbacks, we now know that Sawyer's on that particular flight because basically they're kicking him out of the country. They've just dumped him on this one.
Yet another person who is on the plane because someone else has put them there.
So I think, that's why I think Hurley's flashback.
It was definitely the most fun, and it again served a very useful purpose, because the Hurley flashback is, I don't know if it's quite at the same time, but it's just before Hurley sees the numbers on the hatch.
Yes.
So it kind of does that extra thing of just reminding you that Hurley's got this thing about the numbers, which would have been what 6 or 7 episodes ago that was sort of the big deal. It's just sort of it's a fun sequence to watch, and at the same time yeah, it doesn't quite beat you over the head, but it sort of reminds you enough of the numbers that
it's very strong, because I think when you come back from the flashback, they're walking through the jungle, and Hurley's whispering the numbers to himself, and Kate's like, "Oh, did you say something?"
Yeah,
And then they have this little bit of a talk about the number 23, and she's like, "Oh, that's how much somebody was."
Yeah, it's 23,000 or something was paid, and
Hurley has a little freak out moment, and he's like, "It's not important."
So yeah, it is quite good in terms of, I liked I guess it's the directorial decision or the editorial decision to sort of use the flashbacks in that way to sort of remind you of, like, these are the things you need to know about either the characters or the bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So it's either like, this is what this character has gone from to become. Like, it was really telling, like, very little happens in it, but in the Locke flashback, you see Locke like completely helpless, completely unable to do anything, and having to put up with the sort of shame of having to be carried on the plane, and he can't even pick up his whatever it is he drops.
Yeah.
Again, it's all of them are sort of serving as this reminder of this is what the characters were before the island.
Oh yeah, and I nearly forgot, but actually no, yeah, the other flashback that has kind of, I guess, a bit more meat in it is the second one for Sun and Jin.
Yes, yeah, okay.
We find out about like why obviously Jin is so protective of that watch.
Yeah.
And then that, like, the moment he kind of has that threat where, like, if you don't deliver this, then you'll lose Sun.
Yeah. And because that was quite cleverly done, because they basically did one for Sun and one for Jin, but showing the same initial set of circumstances. And you had obviously Sun be able to understand being spoken, while Jin not understanding the English that's being spoken around them. So it was quite cleverly put together. And as you said, you don't gain a huge amount from it, but you gain that bit of knowledge about the watch, which drops again on the raft and serves as a useful reminder. This is what the raft it's all about. So it makes the moment when Michael offers to give the watch back and then Jin rejects the offer much more poignant. And again, it's showing that the character was this and is now something else.
It reinforces that confirmation that Jin now feels like he's free, like he's made his choice. And then we have Jack's flashback, which, how much you take from it, I think, depends on how good you are at recognizing actors and whether they've.
I was immediately my takeoff was they've introduced Michelle Rodriguez. She's a pretty well-known actress. She's clearly going to be cropping up somewhere.
Exactly.
And they made this with that in my head, they made this really clumsy sort of bit of dialogue where it was effectively like, "Oh, I'm in a different bit of the plane for you. I'm in the back. Have I mentioned I'm in the back of the plane? Well, you're in the middle of the plane." So, given that we've had these sort of hints of other survivors, and I think you dropped the small spoiler about there's a tail section that you should think about.
Yeah,
kind of assuming that at some point, presumably season 2, Michelle Rodriguez is going to be one of the tail section survivors, just because recognizing her, right? Yeah, they wouldn't get her in just to do this literally.
There's like one bit part.
Yeah, there's one like few line bits and pieces, and the fact they had this fairly clunky dialogue in my mind, which was very clearly going, "Oh, I'm sitting over here." I mean, they did it with the numbers because she was in 42 and Jack was in 23.
Yeah,
it was just the way it's, "Oh yeah, I'm right at the back," and it's sort of like, where the wheels are or something. Or it was like it was like they said the same thing about 4 times when in normal conversation it might have been once. That was the
So obviously that is setting up stuff, things to come.
Don't know what it is yet, but as I say, my assumption is she's going to be alive somewhere on the island with another group of survivors, which we have yet to meet. Presumably the ones that were on the radio to Useless Boone a few episodes ago.
Poor Boone. Oh yeah, and we do see Boone make one of his reappearances in the flashback.
Yes, Boone was alive. As he fails to get the first class ticket for Shannon, and
I think one note I did make was this is actually the first flashback for Shannon when you get one from actually her point of view, because
right,
previously the ones that we've had were from actually Boone's
yes, that's
point of view.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think that pretty much covers like the flashback
Yep.
stuff. Yeah, and we get confirmation that the marshal was a real jerk.
Yes, yeah. The Kate flashback was one where I didn't think you learned very much. All you really demonstrate was the sort of antagonistic relationship between her and the marshal. You gain a little bit because you discover that the bank she was robbing for the plane was something that the marshal had set up in somehow.
Yes, and I think you find out that he's been chasing her for 3 years. I think he mentioned that. But yeah, otherwise it's just confirmation. It's just like a reminder, like, oh, I'm not that upset that this guy died quite painfully.
Yeah, it's like this guy seems a complete jerk.
Yeah, so then like looking at the on island stuff, do it fairly chronologically, I guess makes sense. So the first kind of main stuff we really start with is people preparing to go their separate ways. So people are kind of saying goodbye because some people are leaving on the raft.
Yep.
Others are going off to, try and find this dynamite deep in scary places. So everybody's a bit like.
And it's all instigated, interestingly, by Danielle appearing, and that's sort of important sort of later on because essentially there's the 3 main plots for the not on island but on island plus raft, which is getting the dynamite to hide, the raft bit, and the Danielle stealing the baby sort of side plot, and then a few nice little moments alongside that. But all 3 of those are effectively given a sense of urgency by Danielle arriving and basically saying, the others are on their way. They're going to come and
and like the black smoke that's been lit, which we obviously later on find is a deliberate kind of misdirection. Tactic. And I've just realised as well that it's interesting that it actually starts off with Danielle and Walt. Like it's Walt kind of
it's Walt who sees her first.
When you think about it, because that's interesting, because obviously Danielle has heard the voices asking for the child, the boy, which she has assumed is as he gets named baby Aaron, but in fact basically turns out to be Walt.
That was quite a good little piece of misdirection on the showrunner's part in terms of I think as the audience everyone assumed that was the case, and then when Danielle steals the baby you kind of wonder is it part of is that her doing it? Is she part of the others? Is it all and then when the raft encounters what I'm assuming is another group of the others, which we assume so because they take Walt, and at least if we take Danielle at her word, which I think we do at this point, they were after the child and that was the child they were after. So
and I really like how that kind of sequences when they arrive and take Walt is done, but we can I'll try and go through it or in order, otherwise I'm just going to go all over it.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because you've got these sort of 3 plots. The order of them is but in order we've got Danielle arriving. That sort of it sparks we need to get this raft launched. You've got the whole of the beach crew essentially pitching in to get the get
the raft in the water.
And
I think around that there are some nice parts. You've got Charlie collecting the messages to put in the bottom for people. I actually think it's probably my favorite moment in the whole kind of finale is that I really like that kind of goodbye, good luck interaction between Jack and Sawyer. Sawyer basically tells Jack, I met your dad.
He does the reveal about Christian, which he had figured out a few episodes ago, but didn't.
He'd figured it out.
Tell him.
Said it, and basically tells Jack, your dad was trying to call you because you know,
your dad was proud of you. Daddy issues. Resolve some daddy issues. We need to resolve some of them. There's too many on this island.
yeah. And I think it's a nice moment for me because I think that's really a sign of like Sawyer's change. Like that we've seen him go through to some extent. Where I think earlier on he never would have actually bothered to, you know, let Jack know that.
Yeah, well, I mean, this whole episode is very much Sawyer. Like the whole episode for Sawyer is very much him being not what he's been in the past. So when Jack encounters him to have that interaction, first of all, there's an immediate sign that Jack is starting to trust him because he gives him a gun.
Yes,
which is, you know, a big deal. The fact that what Sawyer's doing at that point is he's gone out on his own to make the mast, even though Michael and Jin have basically said, "No, we've got this. You're useless.
Yeah.
We're repairing the raft." You know, he's on his own initiative,
yeah,
doing something for someone else. And later on, you know, you've got various points like when he goes and rescues the tiller that comes off the raft, sort of single-handedly. You know, he basically is incredibly unselfish for the vast majority of the episode.
Yeah, we just get like I think one kind of flash of old Sawyer when he's reading the messages.
Yeah,
like out of the bottle on the boat.
Yeah, but yeah, that whole segment is a really good way of viewing it. And the flashback for him wasn't particularly reminding him of how bad he was. I mean, it was quite amusing that he'd headbutted some minister.
Oh right, yeah.
That was, which at least explained why he was in that police station and how he ends up on the plane. But yeah, it's sort of certainly an interesting episode for him.
I guess, yeah, because he makes you, the connections, isn't it? When he tells Jack that he left Christian because he had to go. Did he have to go because he had just headbutted like a minister of state in the bar? Is that the timeline of events?
I think no, because he had to go because Christian had basically persuaded him that he needed to go and shoot that guy.
Oh yes, yeah.
That was what it was. So it wasn't a great reason for leaving. It's like, oh yeah, actually I will go back to my killing.
Your jerk dad convinced me to go. Yeah, I think we got a sly Empire Strikes Back reference as they were repairing the raft. Because there's one shot where it comes and it's kind of a low angle, so we're viewing it from a little bit from below, like Jin's ducked down, like fiddling with something, and Michael walks up the raft going, "No, that one goes there, that one goes there." Which it might not have been, but I've read it as a deliberate.
Yeah, it could be. I could see that. Yeah,
there.
They've referenced Star Wars a few times, so it's entirely possible.
Oh, and the other really nice moment is when Walt gives Vincent to Shannon.
Yes, yeah. And he sort of made he says Vincent was good company when his mother had died, and so he sort of passing him on to her. And you've got the secondary moment almost when the raft does get launched and Vincent sort of chases it out, and sort of Walt says, "No, go back," and Vincent does indeed go back to Shannon to keep her company.
And I think it's nice as well that they're not kind of forgetting that Shannon is still kind of in a grieving mode because she's struggling to carry all of Boone's stuff with her, like off the beach.
There's that sort of moment when Saeed. I mean, the Saeed bit. You've got a few moments with her and Saeed. There's that moment where sort of Saeed tries to come and help, and it's still a bit clumsy. It's still a bit of a difficult interaction, and it's not till the very, very end of the episode when he comes back with the baby that they
where she's like, she sees the baby, she's glad that's happened, but then there's a very definite moment where she's looking around to make sure that Saeed has come
back as well. Yeah. Which, as we said earlier, ties in really well with the flashback, with her not caring about him whatsoever and just screwing him over for kicks.
And we also have Sun giving Jin like a list of English words that she's kind of spelled out phonetically for him.
Yeah, and you've got the sort of resolution of that where they seem to have sort of ironically come back together as they part ways.
yeah, they have that kind of moment where, like, now Jin's determined that he's got to go on the raft because he's doing that to save Sun. Basically, that's his what he's come down to.
Yeah, he sort of resolved it in his mind. Although I kind of feel like, she could have like avoided doing like really nautical terms, like, port starboard. How about left, right? That's probably a more generally useful.
Well, I guess maybe she's just thinking, like, obviously he's going to be on the raft.
Yeah.
He might be facing the opposite direction to the people he's talking about, just to make sure. But it's still a really good kind of relationship in it, because it's not like they've both gone, we love each other, we're back to normal.
No.
They're both actually kind of saying sorry to each other, because they both kind of acknowledging that they've both made.
Yeah. And I think that it's again the impetus is put because they're obviously both realizing they're about to separate from each other, and so it's the sort of necessity of doing something. But it's good that, like, I think the important part about that is that clearly she spent a long time doing that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not something it's not like oh no, he's leaving, I need to do something.
Something down. Yeah, she's actually sat and done that. And I like it when they Michael's kind of asking, like, well, what words has she given you? And it's like starboard, port, like aft, and then eat. And at that point, Michael's like joking, oh, like, she's done you well, like she's made sure that you've got what you need. And then as people are kind of moving, we see Claire's kind of stressed out, trying to deal with the baby, but also trying to get ready to leave. And Charlie's like, oh, I'll help you. And at that point, he tries to get a gun, like, kind of.
Yeah, he's sort of he sort of acts a bit crazy in terms of, oh, I need a gun, I need to protect Claire, which is sort of, harping back to the fairly useless Charlie sort of early on, in that he's got the right ethics or thought behind it, just not the sort of wits or the what is actually useful. It's like, actually, Charlie, maybe you could like help her out by getting, I don't know, some nappies and helping out on that side of things.
I think to be fair to Charlie, he's still kind of reacting to that feeling like he failed previously when she got taken.
Yeah,
he's still kind of reacting to that. And then we have, I think the last kind of bit in this kind of opening setup kind of stuff. We have the science teacher kind of asking to come along to look after, like, help with the dynamite.
Yep. I know what to do with dynamite, honest. That's not going to end well, but
the interesting combination of Locke, Jack, Hurley, Kate, and Arst, I think. Leslie Arst.
I think it was Arst, because
it's a bit of a running joke that people like Hurley can't pronounce his name.
Yeah. But the only other thing that happens before they set out is that everyone now finds out about the hatch, or at least a large number of people.
Yes, most people
find out about the hatch, because the plan is, oh, we're going to hide in here.
Yeah. We again have like a little bit of a scene, don't we, where like Jack and Locke are like, let's open the hatch, and Saeed's still a bit like, well, we don't know like whether that's a good idea or not. Like, that he raises a legitimate point. Well, others could be in this hatch for all we know.
And it's interesting that Danielle hasn't found the hatch before. Like, she's genuinely surprised by it. She clearly hasn't seen anything like it elsewhere. So that's probably an important little factoid. It's like, oh, okay, so this potentially is something somewhat unique on the island, that someone who's been here 16 years isn't aware of it. So
we do get a little bit of a, I guess, kind of tale from Danielle about a bit more about what she says happens to her.
Yeah,
that we're still not quite sure how much you should believe what she's saying on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically sort of the story of, she sort of says, you learn that she was sort of 7 months pregnant when they shipwrecked. You learn the fates of a couple of her friends, like one of them lost an arm, one of them became infected or something, I think was the sort of description of it. But yeah, not a huge amount that you can sort of take away with any great certainty, because of the uncertainty around her character in general.
And then I think like the first part ends with a shot of the smoke black smoke as a kind of, reminder of the sort of ticking time frame.
Yeah. So, well, there's a few. So the part one of Exodus, it ends with them getting to the Black Rock.
Yes.
That's how it actually. That's how it ends. And there's the reveal that the Black Rock is, of course, not a rock. No, it's a random sort of pirate type ship. That's a slaver's ship rather, which just somehow is 5 miles inland. Which what the?
Yeah, and I like that moment where somebody's like, "How did this get here?" And Danielle's like, "Are you on the same island I am?"
Yeah. It's like something weird. It's like, but yeah, I think because she talks about the black smoke. That's because she actually gives a sort of explanation to it.
Yes.
So, yeah. So they see it, and you actually do get a glimpse of actually something for the first time. Well, before all you've seen is character reactions to it. And this is
right. So the two different talking about so there's the two different black smokes. There's the black smoke from the fire.
Oh, okay, right.
And the black smoke monster. Sorry. So I was meaning like the black smoke from the fire.
Okay, yes, okay.
At the episode as a reminder, because Danielle has appeared and said, like, for me, like when that fire appeared, the others arrived so many hours later.
Right.
Did all of this stuff.
Yeah. And that's the one that, I'm still not sure if that was purely a Danielle fabrication for her ultimate plot to steal the baby.
Yeah.
Or if it was like a genuine, this is what happened, the others, Black Fire. Yeah. I'm sort of leaning towards it being a Danielle fabrication, just because when they, this is a way away in this episode, but when they finally catch up with Danielle, her sort of thing is, oh no, I heard the voices. They said they were going for the child, this sort of thing. And that's the bit she focuses on. So I suspect that's probably the reality of what she heard that made her believe that the others were coming. And then she's probably come up with the black smoke thing herself.
I think the bit that I would question on that is like why, like, she could have done that, but then that's where she goes to try and hand the baby over rather than anywhere else.
Yeah, and that's why I'm not 100% sure is whether or not it's her going there or if that's her trying to signal them, like, I'm going to bring the baby here. So I think you can definitely view it in one of the two ways. And there's enough that's going on around that so that it could be either.
Yeah. But yeah, we definitely do get the smoke monster.
Yeah, the first
view of the smoke monster.
Yeah, and at this point, it's just really a glimpse because it's then sort of said, and the sounds associated with the monster I think are really interesting. The sort of sound effects they use for it, and the first time we meet it this time, like it's almost like it's got these big footsteps associated with it. All we see is this smoke. And Locke sort of saying, "Oh no, stay still," and somehow he knows, "Oh yeah, no, it's going off in a different direction." You can now hear it going away.
Yeah,
and then you've got some exposition by Danielle, who interestingly sort of describes it as a security system, which is a really interesting way of describing something like that. Because up to this point, I've certainly been viewing it as a monster, as a living creature, type thing. As that type thing I say again. But in this case, it is
It is a type of thing.
Yeah, it is a type of thing, which is a creature, a living being. While the description of a security system suggests it's not. It's something artificial. It's something that's controlled by someone else. And is it controlled by the others, or is it controlled by some other party, some other agent? And she says it's to protect the island. And it's like, well, is that the others, or is that something else that's going on? So the fact you just wouldn't describe it as a security system in my mind unless there was a very specific reason to do so.
There is, as you might assume, plenty more to come on Old Smokey.
Old Smokey.
And probably going out of order a little bit. The really interesting part around it in this episode is the second time they encounter it, as they're coming back with the dynamite. Because everybody else like runs away. And Locke does his kind of walk towards it thing. He's like, "Oh, I can, like, I understand it." Like, because we think as well, although we've still not had a clarification, that Locke has already had an encounter. Yeah,
and that was something that I noted down, was that he initially approaches it very confident,
Yeah.
and very much like he did that time we think he encountered it before.
But then it actually does go for him.
Yeah.
Not expecting it to.
Yeah, and he goes from confident to, oh no, time to run, scared, run. And I talked about it like a moment ago, like the sound effects they use are really interested on that because, again, all we see is this sort of predominantly the sort of black smoke, but also a sort of slightly more solid version of like a black smoke, possibly going almost liquid-like, which kind of reaches out. But the sound effects they use is like that of chains and mechanical or something artificial.
I think those are in the sounds for the smoke monster. I think the two main things like I hear in it is, like you say, there's the kind of thumping sound, like it's a massive thing stepping down, and then the kind of the other elements are kind of like a steam engine almost, operating, like valves and things, and
it's sort of got that clunk, 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 where it's trying to drag, trying to drag lock. So it doesn't look like it's a chain around lock, but the sound effect is very much like a chain being wound up and it's dragging lock.
And I think it's kind of because like before now it's very much been obviously hidden from view from us most of the time, or pretty much constantly, and it's, I think, been very very heavily weighed, apart from a very probably few instances that it's something biological, that it is a creature of some type. And I think this is the first real time where there's kind of an implication that it's not something like that's living, that it possibly could be a machine of something.
Yeah, very, very much so. And that's sort of a very interesting development in all of that, combined with, Danielle's description of it being a security system. It's like, oh, okay, who's built the security system? Who's controlling the security system? So I think going back to the order, what we've got next is like the stuff at Black Rock itself. The sort of
so we've got probably the next bit is the stuff at Black Rock. So they go in, they find out, as you mentioned, it was a slaver.
And I was trying to, like, the geography of this, I was like trying to get my head around. It's like, because it was supposedly, I think it was supposed to be an English ship, and it was supposed to have sailed from Africa on the slaving side of things. And I was like, hold on, we're supposed to be like somewhere near Fiji. How on earth is this ship there in the first place?
Which I guess is just another kind of
another mystery of, because we've now had there's the flight from Sydney, which at least sort of, well, I suppose actually the way I've got to kind of think about this is, that's okay. Let's explore this thought a slightly bit more. So at the moment, all of the geography about where the island is has been based around the notion of what we know about the flight, which went from Sydney, was going to Los Angeles, was turned back about halfway through, and so puts you somewhere maybe a bit more Australia side of the Pacific Ocean. But then we've had this plane that we found, which came from, was it Nigeria?
That's from Nigeria. Yeah.
You're like, okay, and that's a short range plane that can only do a few hundred miles. And now we've got this ship that's come out of Africa somewhere.
Yeah, because I think Locke kind of, I think he says something like, "Oh, probably from the East Coast Africa or something." He kind of makes a guess.
So the geography on it, I guess what I should probably be thinking is maybe that the geography that I've got in my head initially might not be right. And therefore, either there's something supernatural going on, and it's actually the island could be anywhere, or what we know about the flight path could be wrong in terms of where it's ended up.
Well, I mean, we do already know that, like, something about the island messes up, like, navigational equipment. So
so it is kind of sort of occupying as like Bermuda Triangle type entity, it seems, because I mean Danielle crashes on the island, and we're not quite sure. I mean, they're French, but we don't really know anything about her. But there seems to be an inordinate number of things crashing into this island.
We kind of know that Danielle's team was on an expedition of some kind, and they from what we know from what she said, they picked up a signal and they kind of go to investigate what the signal
Yep.
is and end up crashing on the island. Yeah, so we have people getting the dynamite out, and we have the
somewhat comic but somewhat sort of
the explosion of ants.
yeah.
Which is immediately prefaced by him moaning, but with a lot of valid points about the kind of the main cast characters, where he's like, does Jin cash fish for everybody? No, he doesn't. It's like the recurring theme of like, some of us have lost weight on the island, as he looks like pointedly at Herthie.
Like, there's more than just the 10 of you guys who seem to be like, I don't know, like you're the main characters in this or something.
And then like, yeah, about 2 minutes later he explodes.
It's like, yeah, we're not going to let you be a main character. We're going to detonate you. Boom. did absolutely, like, when I was watching it the first time, it was like, hit me very much so in terms of like the shock. Because I think they did it well in that, it was a complete, oh no, it's safe, it's fine. Boom.
Yeah. It's quite a fun moment because it's obviously they play it for like, I guess, two reasons. Like, first, there is a comedy aspect of it, particularly because they play into it a little bit later as well on the comedy side, where like Hardy's like, oh, you've got a bit of
him like on your back, yeah.
But it's a reminder as well, isn't it, that this is dangerous. This is
it's made it from, oh, just go and collect this thing, to, oh no, this stuff is dangerous. If you drop it, or it adds a sense of danger to the next step of the fetch quest.
And we're also and it's also probably worth mentioning that the ship is in an area that Danielle, I think, refers to as the dark
territory,
territory or darkened territory. And it's like, oh, why is she calling it that?
Yeah, because we don't know, but I mean, my assumption at the moment is that's possibly the area the monster resides. That was my only real take on it for the time being. But yeah, it's like if you're labeling things on a map and you call something dark territory, there's probably a negative reason for it.
And then I think in a sort of order of events, then I think we then have like the bit on the yacht probably where the tiller breaks off,
and Sawyer proves his worth, and
probably there's some nice character moments in there as well, like kind of sprinkled in where Sawyer's like singing Bob Marley to himself,
and kind of denies it, which is sort of an interesting little way of sort of no, not what. And then, oh, do you like Bob Marley? And it's like, oh no, it's okay. Yeah, Michael likes Bob Marley.
Yeah. And then you get a kind of like Jim looking around, like he also recognizes like the words Bob Marley. So Sawyer, like as we mentioned before, he jumps in, saves the
jumps in, saves the tiller.
But then we do have like a bit of dialogue, kind of character based, where Michael's like, "Are you trying to get yourself killed, man?" To Sawyer.
Yeah, because you have that whole sort of questions: are you a hero, or are you just trying to get yourself killed? And because that's after that he reveals that his dad had killed himself to Michael, and that's why he sort of makes the 2 and 2 deduction. And actually that follows on because Sawyer was basically saying, oh yeah, you should be slapping Walt because Walt's clearly a problem child.
So now we've got characters learning stuff about characters that we know because of
flashbacks. And flashbacks. There's a lot of more shared knowledge now among the main cast members in terms of everyone knows about the hatch, everyone knows about Danielle. You're getting much more of the flashback stuff coming to light because you had Sawyer telling Jack about Christian, you've got Michael learning about Sawyer's past. A lot of that all sort of cropping up now.
Everybody kind of knows now that Kate was a felon. And I think do we then move on to Danielle approaching Claire and Charlie next?
Yeah, I think that the exact order eludes me, but yeah, that's definitely the sort of the start of the Danielle still in the baby plotline C, as we can call it.
I think for me, this is a facepalm moment for Charlie. Just why does he leave Claire and Aaron as with Danielle? You know, Danielle is a crazy lady.
Yeah, but I get, yeah, I mean, she comes along, and I think what's interesting is like the way Danielle changes character there. Like she comes along and is very much desperate. You know, she comes across as very honest, desperately needs Saeed, get me Saeed, get me Saeed. And you know, as the audience, you initially believe that as well. And so you kind of see Charlie buying into that. And then there's the complete sort of shift in her. And then you kind of, and it's all, you know, the next bit isn't as convincing. Like she comes across as really creepy, wanting to see the baby. So that's kind of interesting how she sort of pulls off the act on one side, but on the.
And then as soon as Charlie's gone, like.
You as the audience, you kind of know somewhat what's going on there. You haven't quite necessarily put two and two together that she's going to try and exchange the kid. But so it's like, and there's a few bits that we missed out earlier on, which I think is important because in the first part of this episode, we discover the scratches on Danielle's arm.
Oh yes, yeah, which is what basically
it ended up what's tips Claire off.
Claire off.
And when I first saw those, I was like, oh, like I made the association between those scratches and basically the same looking scratches on Ethan's face. And so I immediately had the sort of question about, oh, okay, was she somehow involved in kidnapping Claire in the first place, or was she possibly involved in the escape of Claire? Yeah, because we don't know how Claire escaped, and there's a bit of me that wonders if Danielle effectively helped her escape or something.
Yeah. I think at this point, like, well, obviously we know Claire's a scratcher. I think at this point you kind of like, for me, the implication is that Danielle takes the baby because she just wants to replace her lost child.
That's I think the initial assumption, and if it wasn't for the scratches, like the scratches to me meant there was something else possibly going on there. And it could be just that she was trying to take the child and that she was involved in kidnapping Claire in the first place to facilitate that aim. But it could there was also something about, is there some kind of link to the others going on here, and started to make you think about that. But certainly, it makes you're not sort of that surprised when she tries to steal as the audience.
Yeah.
When she tries to steal the baby or successfully steals the baby. And you sort of see her go into, and the fact that I described it quite creepy, the way she was like, oh, let me hold the baby. Why won't you let me hold the baby? Please let me hold the baby. I'm not creepy at all. That definitely sort of imparts in the audience's mind, she's just after the baby. She just wants a baby because she's lost hers. But we sort of later discover that that's not the case when we finally get to the end of this particular plot line. And it's good that the sort of secondary motivation is hinted at with the scratches, because you've got something else going on there that you're like, okay, it's in the back of your mind. What's that all about? Which we still don't know the full answer to, because she wasn't kidnapping the baby to have a baby. She was kidnapping the baby. My only assumption is that she must have somehow helped Claire escape, because she's kidnapped the baby to exchange with the others, which means she's clearly not working for the others. Yet she's clearly was involved with Claire in the intervening time when Claire got kidnapped. So I'm leaning towards her somehow helping Claire escape, or some way, shape, or form. But
there's more to be told on how that's happened. Then we get, obviously, Saeed and Charlie come back to
come back, go on a big run.
We get the little moment where Charlie's like, "This is your fault, Saeed," and Saeed's just like having no truck with him and just like immediately like shuts him down. They go running.
They go running. You have the
You have the moment here, don't you, where Saeed's like, I know where she's going, like, but as the audience, you don't know what he means straight away.
And that's interesting because when we discover that Saeed's just run straight for the black smoke, that, thinking about it, means that Saeed has made the deduction that we've not necessarily had, that she's not just stealing the baby.
Yeah.
He's somehow figured out that, oh no, he wants to exchange the baby
or her,
give the baby to the others, because otherwise, why would he think she's running there? So how he's managed to put that together, I mean, he's obviously had the most contact with her and all the other bits, but yeah, that's kind of an important thing, that he somehow managed to instantly go, oh, I know exactly where she's going, because if she was just going to steal the baby, she would clearly be stealing the baby and going the opposite direction to the black smoke, if that's where the others are.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable that Saeed would make that conclusion, because he spent most time with her.
Yeah,
that time he spent with her, she does mention Alex quite a lot, and he's got that kind of skill set as well from his interrogation side, where he has that skill set where he can pick out what is important in what people are saying.
Yeah, he's the one who can make it. That's I think the conclusion from that. But it's interesting that he's definitely able to put the pieces together, I think, a lot better than most audience members could possibly have put it together.
Yeah, and then we have the moment where they take a rest, and it's next to the drug runner plane.
Yeah, that was a little bit convenient, to the fact that of the 25 square miles or whatever that area that they happen to
go past this.
The direct route happened to be through the drug plane. That they got tied exactly at the drug plane, just so that Charlie can have the temptation and take the drugs away. And of course, you have the yet again fact that Saeed doesn't know Charlie's a drug addict, while half the other people do. So,
because I half wonder, just some of the way that Saeed kind of is acting at that point. I have this half wonder, has he stopped there deliberately? But he doesn't know. But he doesn't know that Charlie is a drug addict, so that doesn't make sense. He has done that deliberately. But he just acts a bit weirdly when he kind of is explaining, what's in the statuettes.
Yeah.
Just the way he comes across there, it doesn't come across as he's just kind of explaining something. There seems to be an edge to it.
Yeah, and I guess you could sort of argue that it would have been a landmark that Saeed knows how to get to, which. But yeah, it did seem awfully oh yeah, they're from Nigeria. There was priests and drug runners, and it's all full of heroin. He goes on to the exposition a little bit more than you kind of think.
Yeah, it seems a little bit odd. And then they very quickly get going again. So you're just well, why have you stopped there?
Yeah. I guess you could view it as you either view it as Saeed having a motivation, which I don't, or just the writers wanted this to happen. So
yeah, I think that's it. I don't think there's anything deliberate in the fact that Saeed comes across as a bit weird at this point.
Yeah.
I don't think that's deliberate. I think that's just an unfortunate kind
of. You then get the Charlie getting hit on the head by one of what we assume is the characters assume is one of Danielle's traps, and him persevering. No, we must keep going. Must go on. I'm not going back home.
Oh, you get the very painful wound sealed by gunpowder.
Yep. I mean, it didn't look like it was bleeding that much that it needed, gunpowder sealing. I'm just saying, maybe just hold the rag against it for a bit longer. And
the guy's been annoying, so that's
yeah. Well, he even says it, doesn't he? He goes, "This is because I punched you, isn't it?" And you're like, "Yeah, it could be."
And I think, and amongst these bits somewhere, I think it's in amongst this kind of bit, we go back to the cave, and there's a bit of dialogue. I think it's between Claire, Sun, and Shannon, maybe, where they're kind of talking about, like, I think Sun starts bringing up, like, is the island, like, this idea of the island being a punishment
Right. Yeah.
for people.
And you get the sort of, is that the same point where you get the nice moment of Sun basically saying that Boone, died well?
Yeah, so that's how it starts. Yeah, that's it. And then she kind of raises this idea of maybe the island is punishment for us. And this, the part that I think is like the hook for it is like Shannon kind of says, "Oh, who punished by who?" And then Sun says by fate, and then Claire says, "No such thing as fate." But we know from like Claire's flashbacks, she used to very much believe in fate. So there's a shift there.
Yeah, and it falls into that theme of, is the island a punishment? Is it a test? Is it something else? Because Locke believes it's a test, and all these bits.
And there's basically everybody by now is acknowledging there's something weird going on. Like I don't think there's anybody left who completely denies there's something weird going on.
I mean, Jack tries to ignore it, but I think even he's sort of accepting that there are things that he doesn't quite understand going on.
Yes, because moving into the kind of the third part, we get the clear setting up of the man of science versus the man of faith.
Because and I can't quite remember the context, but Locke says it to him that you believe this because of that, and
because it's like Jack starts to ask him, "Oh, why did you basically walk up to the crazy monster thing?"
Yes.
Why were you telling me to let you go into the?
It was after he sort of forced him out, managed to get them out of the hole that he was pulling it. And there's another good example of that earlier, actually, in terms of the attitude towards carrying the dynamite.
Yes.
In that Locke basically is like, "Oh, well, we'll let fate decide and we'll just draw straws and do it that way." While Jack isn't having any of that and deliberately circumvents.
Deliberately switches it out of Kate's pack. Yeah.
Which is, again, another example of that. No, a man of logic, this is the better way of doing it. I'm going to do it this way versus the man of faith. Now we're kind of on to the conclusions of the various...
towards the closing parts. So I guess the kind of bit that wraps up neatly for our cast of survivors is Sawyer and Charlie get Aaron back.
Yep.
And they actually talk Danielle out of keeping the baby, which is a nice touch, rather than it being a kind of confrontation, like a violent confrontational kind of resolution. They actually kind of,
and that's good because it also gets you. It completes that question in terms of Danielle clearly isn't after a baby for a baby's sake. It was a specific trying to get Alex back situation. What happened to Danielle at the end? I'm now blanking on after that sort of confrontation on the beach by the smoke. Danielle doesn't come back with them, does
she? No, we don't see her again after that, so we just kind of assume that she's gone back to Danielle goes back to wherever Danielle house is.
Yeah.
Because it very much it leaves Danielle in that kind of grey area of she's not
one. She's clearly something different to the others.
She's not a direct antagonist, but she's not also somebody necessarily trustworthy.
Yeah.
And then, as mentioned, that ends with them, coming back, and we have that moment where everybody's happy that they're back, and Shannon's relieved to see that Saeed has come back as well.
Yeah. Then you've got the resolution to the fetch quest where they get the dynamite and blow up the hatch. You've got a bit of a moment with Hurley freaking out over the numbers.
And again, it's even here, I think this is, I keep mentioning, I love little small character bits that they stick in, where they're kind of setting up the dynamite, and Locke's like, "Oh, I'll do it," and Jack's like, "No, I'll do it." And it's when they're putting the fuse in, and it's that makes total sense because Jack's a surgeon, so he's got the fine motor skills, so that's why he's saying, "No, I'll do it." I just little bits like that I think can so easily be missed, but they've there's thinking behind why a character, these characters react to these small things. Oh, but yeah, Hurley sees the numbers on the hatch and has a massive like freak out. The numbers are bad.
Yeah, and just narrowly avoids being blown up after Locke, I think, saves him. But it's kind of an interesting thing because Locke.
So Hurley runs to try and stop Locke from lighting the fuse. Locke lights it. I think is it not possibly Jack that tackles Hurley down?
Yes. Okay. So it's Jack. So Locke proceeds anyway. That's how it pans out. And very deliberately, he very clearly could have paused and just sort of waited for a bit. It's like, oh, Hurley's yelling at me. Could have stopped to sort of, okay, maybe there's something wrong. Maybe the dynamite's in the wrong place. You'd think that if he wasn't so determined to get the hatch open, he probably would have, but he very deliberately I want this hatch open.
And I think that ties into something actually we slightly have missed is just before this, there's some dialogue and where Locke's kind of talking about the fact that he considers Boone to have been a sacrifice that the island asked.
Right, yeah.
And this kind of leads into Jack saying to Kate, we're gonna have a
Locke problem.
Locke problem, because by this point it's clear that Locke's not bothered about getting other people killed at this point. Clearly, just considers that.
Well, he's not bothered about potentially him getting killed. He's sort of, I think it's that he's so fixated on faith and doing what he thinks the island wants him to do, that the consequences to either himself or others be damned. It's just...
Yeah. But we do get the hatch.
Yeah, and just to annoy me, we don't get to find out what's in it.
And this is the final, probably not the biggest cliffhanger, but it's the final shot of the season.
Yeah.
I think the nice touch on it is it's not just like the reveal of a big ladder. It's a reveal of a big ladder that's broken.
Yeah. So it's like, there's still a hurdle to get that past in terms of finding out what's down there. But yeah, it's like, whole triple episode length, and I still don't get to find out what's in the damn hatch.
Welcome to Lost. I think it's really well shot, this as well. Just that when it flicks to the shot looking up out of the hatch down, and looking in, and just the way that it pulls back, and it's the ladder, and it pulls back, and you see the ladder's broken, and then it pulls back, and then it pulls back, and it just keeps going. Yeah,
and it's done effectively from the reverse perspective of what you'd expect. It's not the characters on the outside looking in; it's the hatch looking out, going downwards.
And I really like that thing where it pulls back, you see the ladder pulls back, ladder's broken, and it was so easy for them just to cut it there and be like, oh, ladder's broken. But the fact that they keep going and just really heavily implied that this thing is miles deep.
And so the only other bit is, of course, the kidnapping of Walt and the destruction of the raft by what we assume is the others.
A nice tense build-up, because we have them pick up something on their radar, which they can only use intermittently, and it's night, so they can't see it.
Yeah.
So they all have this kind of debate about whether to fire the one flare that they have.
And I kind of wrote down on all my notes on that one. I was like, what would have happened if they didn't fire the flare? Because they were obviously talking about it a lot.
Yeah.
And it sort of implied that the boat was going away from them.
Yeah.
And that by firing the flare, you kind of go, well, then maybe the others wouldn't have found them. So
what happens then? Yeah.
And of course, at this point, as the audience, you're they're going to be rescued. They've actually found something, and it's that great build-up where it's there's something on the radar, you don't know what it is, and then you've got. I think they use some musical score that sort of is very sort of uplifting as the sort of boat comes towards them and the light comes on.
Yep.
And then
I think this moment is really nicely done, because you have the boat comes across, and I think it's immediately suspicious for the audience because the boat comes across and it's a small boat. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not something that would be in a shipping lane.
Yeah. But you don't see it until it gets quite close, and you've got the jubilation going on where you can hear someone shouting, you can see the light, so it's about, and you can hear an engine, and it's that sort of almost slow reveal of suspicion, where it's like, oh, it's a small boat, and it's like kind of a motley crew among them, but you're still not there. That
and then you have the kind of like Michael, Jin, and Sawyer and Walt kind of like, yeah, you've come to rescue us, and Michael's like, oh, we crashed, there's a plane, and the kind of people on the other boat play along with it for a little bit, and then there's just this very sudden mood shift where one of them just says, "We'll be taking your boy." And I just love that there's no kind of, it's just an immediate like switch shift.
And so and they're pretty brutal about it. They've got guns. They shoot Sawyer. Sawyer's in the water. Jin's jumped in the water after him. They then rip Walt out of Michael's arms, and Michael's in the water. And then they blow up the raft. So that's 3 people who are now adrift at sea and pretty much screwed. And
I mean, you can pretty much guess from putting things together that those are the others.
Yeah. From what we've got that from Danielle. And then okay, so this is the switcheroo, that the child was actually Walt that they're interested in, which is interesting because they clearly were interested in Claire's baby. We think, well, at least Claire.
Yeah, so there is definitely more to come on babies. I will say that much. But yeah, we have the switcheroo, which has obviously been a bit of a deliberate ploy by the writers to have that built in. But then when you think about it, like, Walt is this person who's been displaying these kind of paranormal abilities. And then when you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, of course it's Walt that they would be interested in.
But at the same time, there's a bunch of questions from that, because one of the things that springs to my mind is we've seen that Ethan had effectively infiltrated the group earlier, and so the question is, how long has the others been aware of the group? They've been spying on them, because clearly they got Ethan in among the mix, and that's presumably somewhere along the line where they found out about Walt. So I think there was even a few interactions between Ethan, Locke, and Walt, because of Walt's interactions with Locke.
Yeah, and even in this kind of little sequence here, there's kind of an implication that the others that have arrived on this boat kind of he plays it a little bit with Michael. Michael's like, oh, there are so many of us, and he's kind of half laughing, like in response, like, yeah, like he already knows, and he's just kind of slightly mockingly like, oh, there was a plane crash. Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. How did that happen?
Yeah, we'll take your boy. Yeah. And the way the episode is structured, I think you can easily, like, between seasons, like if you were watching it as it was being broadcast, like between seasons, you could almost forget about the fact that Walt had been taken, because obviously it closes on the hatch reveal rather than Walt being taken.
Yeah, and I guess that's an important. Well, it's certainly an interesting writing choice, because as a cliffhanger, Walt being taken is a bigger, it's much more out of the blue. It's much more, while the cliffhanger with the hatch, it's almost not even a cliffhanger, because you've known about the hatch for so long, and it's like the payoff is coming through. And so it's an interesting writing decision to effectively make your last shot the hatch rather than Walt.
Yeah, because like with the hatch storyline in like these closing episodes, you kind of know that by the end of it they're gonna get it open.
Yeah.
And you kind of know that when they get it open, there's going to be something in there that is
interesting in some way, shape, or form,
like weird or a blocker or something. Whereas the storyline with the raft, the way that ends, that is completely like unexpected.
Yeah, it's the much more natural cliffhanger in my mind, and the fact that the writers deliberately didn't end it with that, as a classic cliffhanger would. The classic way of ending that episode would have been Michael in the water yelling Walt, which is that it's like that would be a classic cliffhanger ending. But the fact they went back to, which is the thing about Lost, the mystery that we've been trying to solve, and the sort of giving the audience the promise that come back season 2 because we've got a mystery we've just about to solve.
Yeah. It's almost like, come back for season 2 because we've just opened this door and look, there's so much more back here.
Yeah. And I guess that's knowing the sort of audience that it's like the audience is going to be more interested to know the outcome of it rather than, oh, there's another new mystery or new kidnapping that's gone on.
Yeah. I think, I definitely think what we should do for our kind of season 1 recap is we'll try and list out the mysteries as best we can that are there.
Yeah.
Both where we've had some progress in some answers, and both the ones where we're just like, what? But yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty good send off for the season, I think. The
standard Lost thing that you feel like so close to finding out something.
If you look at the 3 parts, it's almost like a micro version of the whole season, because it starts off with some character stuff, much like the season did.
Yeah.
Then it accelerates through some like events happening, which the season kind of does in its middle phase. And then it ends with, you've made progress here, but you've not really got any further because it's resulted in another mystery, and also this other crazy thing has happened.
Yeah.
So it kind of sums up like the whole show. And they're getting much clearer, much more straightforward about articulating some of the themes they're going to carry forward. So they basically say the science versus faith out loud.
And we've now seen, there are multiple others, and they're clearly some kind of organised group. I think it was definitely a good ending to the season. I would certainly describe it as such. And while frustrating in terms of want to find out more, that's exactly what it's trying to do. So
yeah. So will you be coming back for season 2?
I will be coming back for season 2. Well, I assume Michelle Rodriguez will make an appearance.
Yes, yeah. That's one of those things where I'm just like, I wonder what it's like if you are somebody who doesn't necessarily spot actors like that.
Right.
Like sometimes I do wish that I didn't spot actors so well, because it spoils some things. Because like when they kind of do stuff like that.
But I mean that was you've got. I think you've got to assume that they wanted you to know that, as the writers, because it was a scene that didn't need to be there. The scene itself.
I mean, they're very much, they put in, like we said, the dialogue about she's sitting on a different part of the plane.
And I think even if you didn't know that she was a reasonably, she was clearly not going to be just a bit part in it. I still think you'd come away with what you needed to.
Yeah. I think obviously, but I do sometimes wonder what it's like for if I don't instantly, as soon as she sits down and before she even speaks, what is it like if I don't go, oh, it's Michelle Rodriguez?
Yeah.
I need more shows to put big name actors in parts that are just nothing and then throw me off.
What's that? Is it Wayne's World that does the? Can we get a better actor in for this bit? No, I think that is the end of season 1 of Lost.
Yeah, so join us next time. We're going to do a bit of a season 1 recap. We'll recap some of the mysteries, get Dan to make some predictions. And I think, some of the stuff we can talk about is perhaps how you're feeling to certain characters who've changed as the season went on.
I mean, I think mostly improved, apart from Boone. But actually, no, my view of Boone's probably improved because he's no longer around. So
not taking up any more screen time.
Yeah.
Poor Boone. Yeah, and I think as I mentioned to you, like before we started, I found a little quiz we can.
Okay, we can do a little quiz as well. That sounds good.
Yeah, so we'll catch everybody next time for a season 1 recap.
Yeah, and if you're liking it, don't forget to leave a like and a subscribe.
Yes, do that, or be cursed by the island.
Yep.